I've been looking forward to this for 10 years since I started doing this. Now, I'm just kidding. Okay, this is going to be fun. I might know some of the answers to some of these, but I want to share this with others. So, who was your childhood hero growing up?
Oh, okay. We're starting off like that. My childhood hero growing up was a 1A, 1B. And it was my dad and my older brother for two different reasons. Uh, my dad for being kind of the symbol of strength for the family and representing kind of the backbone, right? That's more traditional, old school way growing up with my dad now being 86. But my brother was 7 years older. And because there was at times the gap in age between me and my dad, my brother played almost the role of a secondary dad for me. And all my interests and everything were basically what my brother liked. So I would run around wanting to basically be him, even going as far as wanting the same haircut when I would go to the barber, and we went to the same barber. So yeah, I'd say he played a really, really influential, both of them, but my brother played a really influential role, even all through my childhood, sports, all of that.
Okay. So, no Emmett Smith. All right, good.
No Emmett Smith.
No Emmett
No, no, no
Smith.
professional athlete.
Do
We
you
went
think
more
that's
down the mathlete category.
yeah. Do you think though, like when we grew up, there wasn't social media. Now that obviously there is. Like, do you think that's a slippery slope when people idolize athletes?
No, I don't, because I've even grown in over the years with social media. Look, social media is access to information, right? Now, how accurate the information is and what it represents is a whole other thing. But I would say as I grew up, even beyond my brother and my dad, there were definitely athletes that I would look at, and they embodied a certain work ethic and an attitude and a mindset that I said, that's what I want to bring into work every day. Because, even as much as I idolize my brother, we have different passions as we got older. Mine, I put a lot into my career, and so for me, that piece of it was, I had to take certain pieces of what I learned, but also kind of bring to the table my own
Yeah.
flavor, because I wanted to do different things in my career than my brother. And one person that stood out, or I should say two people that stood out, and it's pretty easy, is Leo Messi, who I love soccer, and then Kobe Bryant on the basketball side. And what I loved about Lionel Messi, and I will debate anybody on why I think he's the greatest over Ronaldo, he brought a level of excellence, but then a level of humility, no matter how good he was. And I remember always gravitating to, I love how he's so good, but he doesn't necessarily have to yell the loudest in the room to let people know he's good. He let his work kind of define his greatness in a lot of ways, and I love the humility. Kobe Bryant, it was the work ethic. When you talk about the Mamba mentality and the intensity he brings to the table, for me, that mindset was an important part of shaping my career in a lot of ways, because I think I'm relatively smart, relatively talented. But I don't think those were the things that contributed to, my success in my career. I think there's a lot of smart and talented people. It was the mindset, the work ethic, being willing to kind of put in the work every day, and go that extra mile, which Kobe Bryant, that was basically what his identity was based on. Taking that and applying it in my career obviously helped me out over the last 20 years or so too.
You've got a table for four at your favorite restaurant. You can have anyone dead or alive that's an athlete. So you have Messi, you've got Kobe there. Who is that third C going to?
Ah, I got Messi, I got Kobe. Third seat would probably go to, and I think the easy thing is to think about another sport, maybe going to football. Those of the folks out there that know me know how big of a Cowboys fan I am. Um, Maybe Michael Irvin, believe it or not, which didn't have the necessarily the same refinement and image that others did. But he did have a special gift and superpower, in my opinion, which was help lead people and inspire people. So in the heydays of the 90s, when the Cowboys were winning championships a long, long time ago, yes, I know that opens me up for a lot of jokes. And you think, and now you reflect back and you hear all the stories. Michael Irvin actually appeared to be the heart and soul of what I think is the greatest dynasty in football. Obviously, have a biased opinion towards that, but and that in itself is, you can be great, talented, hardworking, humble, all that. But how do you inspire others to want to follow you and go into battle? And that's a special gift he had.
Love it. What did your parents do for a living, and how did that maybe shape some of your career choices?
Yeah, my dad immigrated to the country. He worked, he was a student, and he was a busboy waiter for many years to kind of help set up a foundation. And then when he finished school, he became an engineer. Super consistent job. And my mom had jobs here or there. I would say more worked like retail, and then was a stay-at-home mom for much of our childhood. And so it shaped me a lot in that I grew up in a household where life was more or less, from immigrant parents, about minimizing risk, right? So you go, you make a good earning, you get health insurance, you buy a home, take care of a family, and do all that. So I grew up in that environment, but being in the Bay Area and finishing school, I did want more, right? And I think the life that my parents gave me afforded me the opportunity to take more risk, and I was willing to take those risks. And some have paid off, some didn't. They were all part of my journey, so no regrets. But I will say, their approach had me second guessing for many years whether or not I was doing the right thing in my life, right? And so I'd say I was overly cautious in some areas, even figuring out what I majored in, what school I went to. Everything was about optionality for me when I didn't know. I didn't know what I wanted to actually do when I was going to school. But I did get good grades, and I just took whatever classes to give myself options. And I think part of it was to mitigate against any risk. It's like, okay, I want to give myself different avenues to pursue at any point in time.
Yeah. Did dad's credentials, degrees, work experience translate to the US, or did he have to start over? How did that work?
No, he came here for it. So he got his education. He moved to the United States in '63 to
Wow.
Texas, of all
Okay.
places, way before the revolution, where a lot of Persians ended up coming to the States. But so he was here way earlier for the purpose of getting an education. And obviously being in Texas in the '60s was a unique time and an era, and a lot to be learned from that experience for him.
Was when you think of either or both parents, what is one or two lessons that come to mind that you want to instill in your kids?
Be kind. It's pretty simple. Like that's the one thing. Be kind to people. It's the one thing my parents instilled on us: respect, kindness, to elders, to friends, to just people in general. And it's funny because when we were having my son 4.5 years ago, little under 4.5 years ago, my wife and I sat down and we both asked each other, we're like, what's the one thing you want him to have? Right? From a characteristic standpoint. We didn't tell each other. And then we shared it at the same time, and we both put kindness. So I, even for me, you realize whether or not you think about it on a day to day, what we were raised, how we were raised, me, my brother, and my sister, and what matters to us today in life, and how we want to raise, or how I want to raise my kids with my wife. Obviously, it just goes to show that it sticks with you. And so
Yeah,
that's an A+ from my parents, I think.
I love that. You mentioned San Jose State where you went to school. Were there other colleges that you were thinking about or that you wanted to go to, or was it really intentional to be pretty close to home?
Um, that was actually a pretty polarizing topic within myself. So I got really good grades, probably could have gone to school in different places. Um, Obviously, it was really expensive to go out of state. I also had a twin sister that I was really close with. Candidly speaking, I stayed home because I didn't have the courage to be bold enough to kind of go elsewhere. It was my comfort zone, and I think some of that is has shaped, even believe it or not, my career and the risks that I wasn't willing to take necessarily early on. I was a late bloomer to that. It took me some time to grow into feeling confident enough to do those types of things.
Makes sense. What is it like to have a twin?
Um, huh, I don't know. It's hard to explain because I don't know anything else outside of being a twin. Um, we don't like quiet. I say, my wife, even she says you're uncomfortable with just pure silence at times, like in a room, in a conversation, whatever it is. Just constantly, I think it's just feeding off of energy from people. It's an important part of it. And so me and my sister were super, super close, growing up and depended on each other in a lot of ways. And I think that shaped how I am today and my appreciation for relationships with people in general.
Love it. All right. Um, the Rebel Billionaire.
Yeah.
Just tell me, what was the greatest lesson from this experience, this kind of amazing experience that you had early on?
Yeah.
And
It's
if
a
you
good
want to
question.
frame it up, some people might not have heard of it.
No, so look, at 24 years old, I had an opportunity to join a program to travel around the world with Richard Branson, who was an entrepreneur I admired a lot. And I had read his book and thought it was a cool opportunity to actually put myself outside my comfort zone. As I talk about like taking risks, with school, I didn't really try a lot of new stuff. This was actually one of the key moments where I had the opportunity to do that. And I won't bore you with how I got involved with it. But going through the program, I was one of the youngest people on the show. There were some other folks that had definitely stronger resumes at the time, including that the winner of the show was the founder of Lovesac, and then the runner-up of the show, funny enough, was the founder of Spanx, Sarah Blakely. And so you look at the caliber of people that were there, and then you look at me. At times I looked at it, I was like, why the heck did they cast me for this? But it was an opportunity to go learn. I took it more for that than being on a TV show. That was cool in itself, obviously. But at that time it was about what can I learn. And so going through the program, got to travel to countries that I never thought I'd go to, spend time with really big personalities. I found that as outgoing as I was, or I thought I was the quiet one in the room of a lot of other big personalities. Um, and so while I was going through the process, I struggled sometimes to figure out, like, how do you stand out in a room like that? And so there's a couple pieces of advice, and what I got the most out of it, funny enough, was when I got eliminated. And then
Tell me about that story. There's a photo that I have to share, but I think it's like a great leadership lesson that I don't know if you saw it in the moment, but I think it's so traumatic in a sense of what happened. I think it's such a great lesson we can all learn from.
Yeah, well, it was look, bottom line is there was a competition. I was chosen as the person. We lost the competition, and the person got to choose who they wanted to go into the final elimination challenge. And I was the one that, Richard Branson was there. They wanted to drop us over a waterfall, Victoria Falls in Africa, in a barrel. They said it was tested by NASA and all this type of stuff. And they wanted me and the other contestant to do it. We said no between the two of us, and then Richard Branson, I think they were running out of daylight and needed to get a shot, so he grabbed my hand and said, "Let's go do this together." And I blindly said, "Let's do it. If he's going to do it, they're not going to risk killing him. They got too much to lose. Maybe they would with me." And so I went and I agreed to do it. He gave me every opportunity to back out. and we would have died if we would have done it. So it was a test, not an actual challenge. And the moral of the story was never blindly follow a leader.
Yeah.
You should ask questions. You need to qualify it. Just because I was willing to do it is not enough of a reason to do it. And that lesson in itself has stuck with me my entire career. And so it's about risk evaluation and assessment. So start there. So that was the experience. I got eliminated. And then I realized I'm sitting in front of one of the most interesting entrepreneurs in the world. I don't know how many times I'm going to have an opportunity to have a one-on-one conversation. And I remember as I was leaving and I was sitting next to him, I asked him to give me one piece of advice that I could apply for the rest of my career. And it's funny because as much as he said, don't blindly follow a leader and just take uncalculated risks, take calculated risks, he also told me fear in itself is not enough of a reason not to pursue opportunities. You just gotta assess the risk.
Say that one more time.
Fear itself is not enough of a reason to not pursue something. Okay, you still have to put yourself out of your comfort zone, assess the risk. But if you calculate the risk and you say it's worth it and this is an incredible opportunity, don't let fear stand in the way of doing that.
So you guys are in this barrel, and I imagine seeing it on television was a different view than being inside of it, right? Because you see sort of the gravity of the waterfall and all that. It sounds like you guys had a few minutes between maybe, saying let's do it, and he says we can't do it, and you learn that lesson. Then you got to get back to land, right? Like it's anchored. And so I imagine that was a time where you had a few minutes with him.
Yeah, it was. And to be funny, not be funny about it. Like to say it was a barrel was a stretch. It was basically like a tin garbage can, and I was wearing a bike helmet in it. So there were signs I probably should have caught myself. But funny enough, that was not the moment I asked the question, because I will admit that was the moment I was in a state of shock, because I realized in the moment, and I wasn't formally eliminated on that spot. He still had to make a decision on who he was going to let go. But in my heart, I knew that was it. I'm like, okay, this is the end of my experience here. It was after I did get a few minutes later on. In fact, it was not even while we were filming. I had stayed as part of the filming for the next month or so, or whatever it was. And then there was a wrap party, so to speak. And it was at that final party where I was sitting by a pool on a bench, basically. And he was sitting next to me, and I was like, this is my final opportunity. So I just asked him the question outright. And so I had a lot of time to think about the question I wanted to ask him before I saw him. It wasn't like a crazy question, but an important one. I needed to walk away with something more from the experience as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. How do you explain to just the average person what you do for a living now?
Yeah, well, I get asked it quite often, and it's hard to explain. So, at the core, I'm in banking. So, I work on banking startups, entrepreneurs, venture capital funds, private equity funds, family offices. Um, but that is what I do at its core from a business standpoint. But how we do it is not selling just banking products and services. So whether it's myself or the broader team that I work with right now, we bring a lot of value adds. So we've become subject matter experts within the technology and innovation and venture capital private equity space. And the idea is bringing problems, solving tools. So whether it's products and services or value added expertise and advice, that's what we bring to the table that helps drive people wanting to work with us. But we are in the business of driving innovation, capital. Um, uh, we can rephrase that, but it's in the business of supporting the innovation economy, and that goes to the company level all the way to the capital that's being funded into these companies.
And so, like, you would work with a VC firm who maybe needs funding and you'd work with those founders as well? Is that
Yeah, so we would, let's start with a VC firm. We would work with a firm. We can do their banking, provide them lines of credit, and do all that. But we also, as they raise funds, take a snapshot of the broader view. And if it's a new fund manager, somebody that's just raising a fund, we have in-house expertise that are CFOs and platform IR folks, other bankers. It could be that help actually get the fund online, help funds understand how to put the infrastructure in place, how to access capital from limited partners. So we do a lot of that work. And then at the end of the day, we hope that we do that and they want to bank with us. And then we also try to bridge the gap between the investor community and the entrepreneur community. You have a founder that's looking to raise a round. First, you can provide guidance and advice around what it takes to do that. Because we're so close to the venture capital community, we kind of sit in the center of all the information. So it's how do we get information from investors and founders and investors and LPs and create value out of that information to just, and I tell people, we're not going to be the single reason anybody's successful, but we certainly can help increase the probability across the board for many companies and firms to help them succeed. And if we've done that, it's pretty gratifying work.
okay? You told me to think about my career in 3 chapters, each chapter being about 13 years, give or take. Why do you think it's important to kind of approach it that way? And I'd love to kind of hear how you think about the chapters in your career.
Yeah, well, you work roughly 40 years in your career, by the book, so to speak. But and I learned it. I didn't really recognize this until things started to come together for my career. But I did get really good advice early on from somebody that was really close to me that said, don't focus on the money or the title or any of those things. Focus on developing the skills, and then those things become a byproduct of the skills that you create. And if your employer doesn't reward you for the skills you have, you now have the skills that other people want. So you've created opportunity elsewhere. So I think one of the biggest mistakes people early in their careers do is they get caught up on title, promotions, and they talk to you. It's about how long until I get this? And my response is, how long till you develop those skills? It can happen in a year, in 5 years, in 10 years, or maybe you never develop them and you never start to get rewarded. But I just found that if you think about, you finish your school in your early 20s and you get to your early 30s, mid 30s, generally that chapter is, oftentimes, and I'm speaking in general terms, may not be married, may not own a home at that age. You're in the figuring out stage of your life in your career. So you don't have as many responsibilities. And again, I'm speaking generally. So you have the opportunity to take risks, learn things, try different things, and really figure out what it is that you want to do. Because you can go to school for whatever and get your degree, but until you hit the real world and you start trying things out, that's when you really learn what it is that you want to do and what you're passionate about. And in those first 13 years of learning, that will give you the skills and help you figure out what it is that you want to do. So then you can focus on the next 13 years of your career, which in my opinion, it's the prime of most people's career. Highest earning potential. You have the energy to go out, do stuff. You have the skills to actually do the things necessary to be successful. And then after you get through that, you're 50 plus, not to say you're retired and you can't try new things, but a lot of the work you've done for 25 plus years, you're not going to parlay. Now you're going to parlay that into the final chapter of your career. So I made a ton of mistakes in my first chapter, but the mistakes that I made in that first chapter shaped my ability to take advantage of the opportunity that I had in my second chapter. And obviously, I'm not at the third chapter yet, but I'm inching my way towards it. I'm not getting any younger.
Yeah, I hear you. I like that. Who's had the biggest influence on your career?
You mean a single person? Well, I would say a few different people because and maybe I'll touch on part of the first chapter is I left after I came back from the show. I thought I was entitled to more than what I was doing in my career. I was 24, 25 years old, I thought, oh my God, I just traveled the world. I had this experience. And I said, I need more. I need more money. I need more opportunity, all of that. So I left this industry, venture capital, startups, innovation, and went into real estate. And I failed. I failed bad. And so I had bought a home, taken out with my brother and my sister, taken out my equity, started my own real estate company. And then '08 crash hit. I lost everything, moved back home with my parents, and had to essentially rebuild everything, which was a really humbling experience for me. The good was I tried something and I challenged myself, and I learned that the grass is greener. It isn't always greener on the other side. So I went back, and wanted to get back in the industry, but I'd been out for a year and a half, 2 years, whatever it was, and was put in a position where I had to try to get a job in a really difficult time. And I had never before that period of time not gotten a job I had interviewed for. I was batting 1,000 on every interview. I always got to choose the job that I wanted. Now I've been humbled to realize that life doesn't work that way. So I I leaned on people and relationships I had. And there were a couple different people that certainly stood out that gave me opportunities. One was Ron Kundich, who's the person that ultimately ended up hiring me at a bank. And then the other one was Jeffrey Javier, who actually works with me now at our current bank. They prepped me, gave me opportunities, trained me kind of to get back into the game, so to speak. And I always vowed to not forget that. That gave me the opportunity. Then the person that had the single biggest impact on my career is Samir Kaji, who was we co-founded the practice at First Republic together, and we had worked together for over 15 years before he moved on and launched his own company. He helped shape who I am in my career in a lot of ways, and I give him a ton of credit. He helped build up on my confidence, my skills. He gave me opportunity, challenged me in ways other people hadn't in the past, I would say, in my career. And it's always a tricky situation where when you're working with a friend that's as close as Samir is even to me today. What's unique is even that opportunity I almost screwed up, because I remember when Samir was at a bank and back in 2010, he called me and I was at another bank and said, hey, there may be an opportunity here. I had already worked at that bank. Would you consider coming back? And I liked where I was at. And casually I was like, I'm not interested. I'm not really looking. And he's like, okay. And he hung up. But we ended the conversation, whatever it was. Probably like 30 seconds later, phone rings and he says, now I'm calling you as a friend, not as somebody work related. And he told me point blank, you're being an idiot. I said, why? I'm happy. He's like, because you don't even know what's being presented. You have to go through the process of seeing what the opportunity is before you decide it's not better than the current opportunity you have. Uh, it was a fair point. So I agreed. I said, okay, I'll meet with a few people. That phone conversation was the catalyst to get me to go back to that bank. And then he and I were just doing a bunch of whiteboarding and asking ourselves, what do we want for our career? And that was the catalyst that helped us move to the next bank, in First Republic Bank, where we launched the platform there. And then that has now shaped where I'm currently at right now. So if it wasn't for him in that phone conversation, I wouldn't be sitting here today. But he also contributed to my success and helping me over the years too, the 10
Yeah.
plus years that we ended up working together.
It's crazy how those like moments can have all these ripple effects in your life and your career. I want to go back for a second. You moved back home, the real estate thing didn't work out. What is your self-talk and confidence? Is it shot? What are your closest family members or friends telling you? What was it like?
Yeah, confidence was more than shot. I literally say it was one of the most humbling experiences that I had ever been through. And I had just met who's now my wife, and that was 18 years ago or so that we had met. So I just started dating somebody that I really liked too, right? Now ended up loving and marrying and having starting a family with. Um, and found myself in like a tricky situation where I'm like, how do I manage around this? Right? I'm not working anymore. I got to get a job. I got to be able to pay my bills. It's funny because the people around me had far more confidence in me at that time than I did. I started questioning myself. I started questioning whether or not I could get back in the business, if somebody would give me an opportunity. And my family is like, no, just, just stay focused. It's going to happen. And I even almost took a temporary job at one point. And my now wife was like, no, just be patient. It's going to work out. And she was really great in supporting me and not expecting anything early on. We started out with a very humble relationship in the dates that we had and all that type of stuff. But she was just like, just hang in there. It's going to work out. So the belief the people around me had in me really helped me power through, right? And there were days where I would sit there and actually question whether or not it would work out. But I learned a lot. You got to have confidence in yourself and faith. And I think in that moment, I realized like, it doesn't, like, life doesn't always work out the way we plan. We just got to figure it out. And figuring it out is the difference between those who make it and those who don't.
Yeah. Every time I see like a new headline of 1,000 people getting laid off at a tech company, I can relate to it to an extent. And it's like, I wish I could say something if it's their first time that they've ever hit a wall, because I think of the advice that you just gave.
Yeah. Well, it's legitimate because they're like there's trauma associated with going through these things, and I'm sure we'll touch on it, but I ended up going through it again later on in my career in a different way.
Yeah.
But ultimately those moments in time, and in that moment, it's the toughest thing you're going through. It feels like everything is riding on it. But then years later, when you reflect back, you realize that those moments in time actually shaped who you are more than anything. The good times, you don't actually, what basically shapes who you are the challenges that you're able, not willing, you're able to overcome in your career and your life at the end of the day.
What's the greatest lesson you've learned from Ron?
Ron, um, give people a chance, because he could have hired other people, but he believed in me. And so, it's not always about the strength of a resume, but it's also the hunger and grit in the person. He bet on me because I think he thought I'd outwork everybody else. And that was my commitment to him. There were people with stronger resumes that probably could have took those jobs, but it was about betting on people rather than resumes.
Yeah. One lesson that stands out from Jeffrey.
Patience. He used to do whiteboard sessions with me, teach. He had a way, and again, he bet on me as well. He's about relationships. And so for me, it was an important part of making sure I was always doing the same thing for others going forward. Because you can't, sometimes, you don't go repay the people that did these things for you. They don't need it. It's about paying it forward and helping others the same way they helped you. So, but he was really, really patient with me when I was going through that transition in my life and career.
You said the word relationships, and one of the questions I had actually was around reputation, because I feel like you're in a kind of a small industry where if you burn a bridge, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but like everyone knows everybody in a sense, especially in Silicon Valley. What advice would you give someone early on in their career, just in terms of thinking about the reputation and some of the decisions that they're about to make?
Yeah. Um, I'd say one, being nice, being kind, and building a relationship are all different things, right? You have to build authentic relationships, real relationships. So I think a lot of people focus on how they look to somebody else and whether or not on paper that represents a relationship. A relationship it needs to be authentic. You need to genuinely care about the people, whether it's the people that work with you, for you, or you work for, meaning your clients, right? And and I think oftentimes people focus on their priorities and what matters to them. My view is the best professional relationships are the ones where the people like each other, respect each other authentically, right? And do things to help each other, right? So you have to, it goes beyond, building relationships in this industry. You can be the most liked person, but if you're not doing anything to help drive value, that relationship is just a personal relationship. But if you want to build a professional relationship, if you're just driving value, there's a lot of people driving value, right? Doing the same thing. You could say day to day, many jobs are commoditized, right? But tie goes to the runner, right? Using sports references, and the runner being you, right? You want to be able to be in a situation where you have that relationship and you win the tie. So I think that is the differentiating factor for a lot of people and success within this industry as a whole, because there's a lot of talented people.
What would you say is one thing to think about when it comes to developing trust?
Listen, I think most people are focused on talking about what matters to them and trying to sell. It's more important to listen to what matters to the other person, because the second you recognize their priority and then figure out how that intertwines with your priority, you got something special. Somebody once told me, they said, I'm so good I can sell ice to an Eskimo, right? As a salesperson. My view of it is, why sell ice to an Eskimo if the Eskimo doesn't need it? Why don't you ask questions, find out what the Eskimo needs, and then bring that to the table? And now you've solved a problem instead of sold something. Nobody wants to be sold anything. People want their problem solved. And I think sales and selling something is a byproduct of problem solving at the end of the day. And so I think that's the number one thing is, you want to build trust, ask questions. If you're talking about yourself, you're learning nothing about the other person and what matters to them.
Makes sense. What's the best career advice you ever got?
The best career advice I ever got goes back to what Richard Branson said, which is, fear is not a reason to not pursue something. Because I think most people don't pursue things out of pure fear of what the negative outcome could be of that.
What's one piece of bad career advice that you hear out there that you think we should ignore?
I'd say the bad advice, it's not a specific thing. It's more advice that's given based on what people think you should be doing versus what you want to do. Right. And I enjoy what I do. I enjoy the people I do it with, the organization I do it for. And there were many times where people go, why don't you go do this? Why don't you go launch a VC fund? This was, even people used to ask Samir and I, right? And like, because I enjoy what I do, right? And there's sacrifices you make for any move. But I think sometimes there's pressure from the outside because that's what other people want to do. There's pressure from them as to what you should go do. And I view it, I'm like, what you should always do is ask yourself if the advice that's being given is aligned with what matters to you and what your personal goals and professional goals are in life. So I think the bad advice, it's just advice that's based on what people would want for themselves rather than, again, asking questions and realizing what is important to you.
Makes sense. What is the hardest career decision you've ever had to make? And I'm wondering, how did you navigate it?
The hardest career decision was probably, man, it was after the bank run in 2023 of First Republic. Was figuring out what the next chapter was going to be. Was it going to be to join JP Morgan? Was it going to be to evaluate? I spoke to different banks. Was it going to be to, land at Citizens? I don't know, right? That the reality of it is I knew I wanted to do the same work for the same clients with the same people. And I felt like I was making a decision, knowing the team that I ran at First Republic and how close we were. knowing that I would be making a decision that would have a big impact on many people, right? And knowing that I couldn't mess it up, right? So
Did
it
the
was.
bank, like what happened with the bank, did it impact your relationships at all, or in a sense, or is that sort of like, I don't know
You
the
mean with
intricacies enough. Yeah.
with the people that I worked with?
Yeah,
Yeah, it
like
brought us closer. Yeah, look, the bank run in its way, it was a very, very difficult time for many people, not just myself, everybody going through it. Disrupted kind of the predictability in many people's lives. We'd been working towards something for so long, and then it almost felt like overnight the rug was pulled from under us, and we had to figure it out again.
how do you
Um,
explain just that, like, again, if you're talking to my wife, well, actually, wait, she was in banking. So, like, don't explain it to her. Explain it to me, the idiot. How do you explain, just succinctly summarize, like, what happened if someone's listening to this for the first time and they, maybe they didn't pay attention to the headlines, they're not in the industry. How do you just kind of summarize it?
Yeah. Well, look, to just, bring it down and simplify it, a bank run is when all the clients of the bank or many of the clients of the bank all start taking their money out at the same time. And banks are in the business in a lot of ways of taking in deposits and then lending it. And if you don't have enough deposits in the bank accounts, there's a gap between that and being able to lend and fulfill your obligations. And I won't bore you with all the balance sheet nuances on what got us here, but the reality of it is all the money started going out, getting wired out at the same time. And so the government doesn't like to see that. So they step in and essentially put a halt and freeze that, and try to find a party that will stabilize that, right? And keep depositors like you and me and everybody from panicking and running. So that happened. And ultimately, the bank went into receivership. JP Morgan won the bid to take over essentially. And it was traumatic in the sense that it happened so fast, right? In general, you had a lot of people that thought maybe they would finish their careers there who are now at the drawing board saying, what's next? And infrastructure was built out, the business was built out, and wherever we all ended up landing, we were going to be rebuilding some of that, right? We're going back to the drawing board and having to do it again. Um, our team grew closer. It was a shared experience, right? The one thing you realize is you're all going through it together. And I think in general in life, what brings people close together, allows people to connect, whether it's friendships or professionally, it's shared experiences, right? And we went through a really big one together. And we're all, most of us are here at our current spot together too. Um, so for me, I thought it was a moment where we all grew closer, and I think we're stronger as a team today than we were ever before because we have an appreciation for each other and the opportunity that lies ahead of us.
And so you said the hardest part was making the decision about what to do next.
Yeah, because we had to pick the right platform to build on. You had to look at it at that time. It's like we need to pick a safe bank. We need to pick a bank that's willing to let us do the business we want to do. We had to land at the right platform individually, collectively, as a group, as a platform, all the bankers that maybe were considering different places. It was a big decision because if we didn't pick the right place, either clients would have a tough time working with us, and that doesn't allow us to build on the momentum that we had built for over a decade at our previous job. Um,
Are
or
the
we,
clients from the old
yeah,
bank, are they understanding?
some Some were, some weren't. Some
Okay.
were, but didn't care, right? I'd say it was a mixed bag of types of clients. And look, everybody has to make decisions for themselves. So I'd say this is a no judgment zone on my end. There's a lot of emotion. There was no handbook for how you're supposed to react in that moment in time, right? So I think a lot's been learned by everybody since then. But yeah, look, we wanted to only do it one more time. I only wanted to do it one more time, and I looked at it. I'm like, I gotta nail this, right?
If you didn't
And
make the right decision, did you feel like, it could have been like career suicide? I know you were hard to get a hold
Yeah.
of during that. Like I couldn't even talk to you, right? So I didn't know what was going on. I felt like you're probably on the phone trying to get a few hours of sleep. Did you feel like that next move really could have been a make or break for you?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that was a critical point of whether I would still be in banking or not, to be honest, right? I make the wrong decision here. I lose the confidence of people that have trusted me for so long. I lose, meaning in colleagues, employees. I lose the trust in our clients because, look, clients love you, but if you go away for years and aren't front and center, they have to go move on and work with other people solving their problems, and you open up that door. And so for me it was, we got to keep the momentum going. We can't stop and completely restart this thing. And so for so it was a very, very important decision, and it was, margin for error on it was really, really slim. um and I felt the pressure of it in the moment. I was a new dad of a 1 year old, so I was just learning how to be a dad and a working professional. I had a bunch of people depending on me professionally, and I had to figure out, how do you get this right? And I did get a phone call from, funny enough, Samir, while it was all happening, and he said a few words that were critical in that moment, where he told me, because I'm an emotional guy. I feel a lot, right? And that's just my personality, and probably what helps me even bond with people as a whole. But he told me, he's like, I know how you're feeling. I know you're feeling a lot of big feelings. But as the leader of that team, you don't have the luxury to feel right now. You can feel later. Right now, you need to be a leader, rise to the occasion, and figure this thing out, right? For yourself. And that's going to have an impact on everybody else as well. And then you can kind of feel later on. And so for me, I turned into essentially like a robot in some ways, a machine, to just be like, right now it's business. Like, I got to figure this thing out because there's too much at risk that we can't lose. Um, and I won't say I did it perfectly, because there's a lot you learn about the things at home, and uh, balancing with being a parent and everything. But wisdom comes with experience, and I think there's even things I would do differently this time around, but was able to do it, and drive to a favorable outcome, and put us in a position to be able to do the work that we're doing today. But it was a punch in the gut for sure.
Yeah. Um, in the context of because I think that much of it, let's just say that situation, I will say much of it out of your control. But when you think about the things more in your control, a setback, a failure that you've had, what's one that comes to mind where maybe there's a lesson that we can learn from?
Yeah, well, I'd say two of them. I'd say one of them was, the setback was obviously earlier on in my career, when I went into real estate and kind of had to restart. And it was a humbling experience. And it also gave me a sense of appreciation for what I did have. And then I had a great run for 15 years. And then the second setback was, um, what happened in 2023 at my previous bank, when overnight it felt like it was all gone. The learning from it, though, it that those two events have probably shaped my career more than anything, because it was the low of lows in some ways, trying to figure out how to get out of it. And I grew more than I ever did during a really short period of time. I gained confidence in myself in being able to figure it out. And so if this was to happen, not this specific event, but as I deal with adversity going forward, I've been there, done that, right? And somebody once told me, they said, wisdom isn't getting gray hair and having years under the belt. Wisdom is getting punched in the teeth and staying up and keep going, right? And figuring it out. So I think, whether it was early on in my career and having to overcome that, I was figuring it out, and I did. And that helped shape me early on, or it was later on in my career, or most recently, having gone through this. Um, it's life is complicated, and I'd say a lot of times you feel like you're doing everything right and things are working out for you. But I think it's sometimes you have to take a step back and realize you can do everything exactly like you're supposed to be doing, and the outcome isn't what you want or expect. But that doesn't necessarily mean things aren't going to be fine or even better, right? In a lot of ways. But it's really hard to understand that until you've gone through it. And I think this most recent event gave me a whole new perspective and appreciation for work every day, being able to do the things that I'm doing today. At one point, I probably was like, yeah, of course, this is just what we do. Now I'm like, no, this is what we get to do. And so having that perspective, and I think that's at all stages of your career, having the perspective and appreciation for what you're able to do. This is all at will employment. Everybody is where they are at will. They're choosing to be there. So to sit and not appreciate what you're given is a shame, right? And I think more people need to appreciate the opportunities that they have in front of them. And if they're not feeling like they enjoy it and they love it, they should figure something else out, right? Life's too short to spend your days doing things that you hate. I strongly
Yeah.
have a conviction around that.
It sounds like there's great business lessons in there, but maybe I feel similar to you. I learn more about myself through those. When my back is up against the wall and I'm going through adversity, obviously hard to see in this situation. There's this quote that I have, this book that's always on my desk, and the quote is, I really believe that wisdom is not the product of time or age, but of self-inquiry, right? It's not about the gray hairs. It's about the reflection
Yep.
needs to take place.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's as accurate as it gets, but it's hard to know that until you've gone through and experienced it and you say, this is what they're talking about.
Yeah. Well, this is a question I asked my favorite football quote coach, and we could use a sports analogy, but I asked him, how do we handle pressure better, right? Especially when you think about a quarterback, being behind the line of scrimmage with a bunch of big dudes coming to sack him and having like 3 seconds to throw the ball. I use that analogy, but when you think of it career-wise from what you've learned, if you were advising someone earlier on in their career and they asked you about how can we better handle pressure type moments, what would you say to them?
Be prepared. Preparation allows you to deal with the moment and the pressure itself. The pressure is not nearly as big as you think it is if you've done the work to be prepared for that moment. And um, I oftentimes, whether it's somebody early in their career interviewing for a job, do due diligence on who you're interviewing with, the company, their values, the person. If you can find anything, information is accessible to all. Is do your homework. You'll find that pressure situations don't feel as big when you've been preparing and waiting for those moments for a period of time.
Spoken like a true Raiders fan. Uh,
Yeah, commitment to excellence, right?
no. Rich Gannon said it's the 5 Ps. Proper preparation prevents poor performance.
There you go. That's another way of saying basically the same thing.
Yeah, that's been burned in my head here.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. So, like, now that you're leading a team, what is the most important trait that you look for that might not be on a resume? I know we talk about maybe handling adversity, and I know some of these things are really hard to interview or to find out in an interview, right? Like you almost need to work with somebody for a few months to understand their character. But like, somebody says to you, Sam, like, hey, what's the most important trait? Even if it's hard to measure, what comes to mind?
Grittiness. I think grittiness and hard work, right? I think the world is scoured with super smart and talented people, right? But it's the application and the work that you're willing to put behind it um, that determines whether or not you'll be successful. And look, I'm not going to give the exact quote, but Roger Federer gave a commencement speech, I want to say within the last few years, and he started talking through what greatness is, right? And the stats. And he starts talking about, I only won 40 or 52% of my matches. And then he goes on to say, of those, I won yada yada games. And then it translated to him being one of the greatest tennis players of all time, right? Depending on who you ask. So I think the thing is it comes down to, it's that margin for error between good to great is pretty slim. And in my world of non-professional athletes, maybe it applies from the professional athlete standpoint as well. Hard work is that thing that separates people. There's a lot of people with some baseline skills that are the same, but the people that ultimately stand out are the ones that are going to work hard. But I'm going to add on a plus and do it in an authentic way, because people will see through it. If you're doing it, you do it for the right reasons, and do good things that impact people more than yourself, right? So but I think authenticity is just an important part of everything everybody does. Even myself, when we're interviewing, when you say what's the number one thing, yeah, I want grittiness. Grittiness also ties into people that are willing to work hard and figure it out if it doesn't go exactly as planned, or it does and the company transforms and changes, right? What a person is doing in a given function today at place we're working, we launched a private bank almost 3 years ago, 2.5 years ago, whatever it is now. It's going to look different today than it is in 5 years and 10 years. And so the people that are going to be along that journey are going to be experiencing different challenges along the way, and they got to be adaptable and willing to shift their day-to-day responsibilities. And so for me, I just think that all ultimately ties to like hard work and grittiness and being flexible, I guess you could say.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said adaptability. I have that. I have created this draft of like the traits of high achievers that I've had a chance to spend some time with, and that's on the list.
Yeah,
Adaptability is on the list, definitely.
has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Um, one of the guys I got to talk to was Mike Lombardi, who um, was on the staff of one of your other favorite teams, the 49ers. And he said his,
Yeah.
yeah, right? He said his biggest career regret was that he let his ego get in the way of his knowledge growth. And he really regretted leaving Bill Walsh. He said, I should have stayed there 5 more years. And I thought I couldn't afford to live in the Bay Area. I think about this all the time.
Yeah.
And he said, you know what? It would have been, it just would have, it would have worked out. Yeah, the cost of living, etc. But that was his biggest career mistake. When you're
Yeah.
observing and you're talking, I know you because I'm sure you give advice out and whatnot. But when you think of like other career mistakes, is there anything else that comes to mind?
Yeah. Definitely. Look, early on in my career, even leading up to when I went on the show at 24, I was very confident. I said I had interviewed and never not gotten a job that I wanted. And I would go as far as saying probably a little bit arrogant, right? A ton of blind spots. I was not a great employee. Okay. And only as time passed did I realize like I was immature. So I don't want to call it a regret because, things ultimately worked out and I learned from them. But I think there's things I did early on in my career that made my path far more difficult than I needed to make it for myself. So I had to overcome it. I ultimately ended up going back on an apology tour to a few people that I supported early on in my career. I was their analyst, for instance, right? And I basically said, I apologize because now that I've progressed my career and have some really talented analysts working on our team, I would never have hired me, right? I was a pain in the butt. I thought I knew everything when I knew nothing. I should have been a sponge just listening and learning. Um, and humbling myself to apologize, I realized number one, people are willing to forgive. They actually appreciated it a lot, right? And so and that ultimately opened up doors because they were contacted when I was going back to my employer once on what are your thoughts on him. This was completely unplanned. This was years later as well. But if I had regrets, I'd say, you know listen, and don't assume you know everything, especially earlier on in your career. Be a sponge. It's less about thinking you have it all figured out and actually spending time to listen so that you can learn and figure it out over time. It'll make it a much easier path. You will get people that will surround you and want you to succeed instead of trying to stand in the way of it. And early on in my career, I think I created more barriers, right, for myself
Yeah.
and speed bumps than I really needed to.
I was referencing just general mistakes of other people, but I appreciate you sharing your
Oh shit. Okay.
no, no, I love it. I love it. I prefer it actually.
That's
Okay, so you're meeting this person for coffee. They're 30 years old or so. They just started a family. They have one child. They have they're in the sort of middle early stage of their career, that still that first chapter that you were describing, and they want to get your advice on business school. They have a mortgage. They've got two car payments. They assume they live in the Bay Area and they want to go to a top school, maybe UC Berkeley for a business school. They don't know what they want to do next. What advice would you give them?
yeah. Do it for the right reason. It's really expensive. And if you're looking to just bolster a resume and say, I went to business school, it's not enough. You got to be looking to actually get something out of it. Oftentimes, obviously, the network is a great piece of it, but you got to know, I think you got to know a little bit more about what it is that you want out of your career and life before you double down on going to business school. And I've seen this so many times where people do that and then they reflect back and they're like, I don't even want to do this anymore. I want to go into a different field, right? If you're going to go through that and take on that financial responsibility, I think you need to know that this is what you want to do. And now you're doubling down on it and investing in yourself for the future. But I will say, even with that, again, what I was saying earlier, it doesn't guarantee anything. Just because you went to whatever school and have it on your resume does not guarantee success in your career. At the end of the day, it comes down to you putting in the work and leveraging the skills and the network that you generated from going to that school uh, to help kind of focus and drive your career.
Makes sense. What do we get wrong about salary negotiation? What's like one piece of advice you would give?
Um, I think it's different at different stages of your career, right? Oftentimes, like I've seen people right out of school trying to negotiate $5,000 on an offer. And I look at it and go, do the math after taxes and ask yourself, what does that even mean from a paycheck standpoint? Are you willing to give up the opportunity for an extra few $1,000s here or there that does not impact your life as a whole, right? So again, it comes back to, especially if you're in the first 13 years, is focus on what the opportunity is ahead of you. Look, when I finished school, I made $40,000 as an analyst right out of school, when a bunch of people I went to school with were getting management jobs at car rental places and retail, making 2.5x what I was making. And it was money. And they were chasing the money. Um, I just find things rarely work out well, experienced by my real estate pursuit. That when you pursue it just for the sake of money, it rarely works out. You got to actually enjoy what it is that you're doing. And so I'd say my advice to people interviewing, that 30-year-old interviewing, is focus on long-term earning potential, not the moment in time, and a few $1,000s here or there. If you find that it gives you the best opportunity to grow and develop skills, and it creates a path for you to grow within the organization, and there isn't a ceiling, the money will be there over time, and you'll get recognized and rewarded. And again, if they don't reward you, somebody else will, right? So don't focus on what doesn't matter most, right? Certainly
Yeah,
have to pay your bills, but usually when you're interviewing for these jobs, if you're considering a few different ones, that means they're generally within some kind of the same range,
yeah,
within some compensation, right? You're not talking about something that's 20% of something else. They're within range. So it's when they're within range, you got to start focusing on the other things that matter the most.
makes sense. You have a very successful career. I know you want to be a president husband and father at home. What's one thing you do to balance that?
Set boundaries, which was a really, really hard one. My
Tell me
wife
about that.
helped me in general learn the whole concept. So, um, I think at the end of the day, you realize that most people, we work with, whether it's people we report into or people that are around us, um, and nothing against people who don't have kids, but a lot of people have experience either with their own kids or people they know and love that have kids. um, People are understanding. So as long as you're doing your job and you're doing it really, really well, it's okay to set boundaries and let the world know what matters to you. Because um, I love what I do. I think I'm super grateful for doing it. But if you were to strip out my wife, my son, um, it wouldn't be gratifying, right? It's just for me, and that's personally for me. It's just work. So for me, I work really hard to do a lot of this stuff, and a lot of it is to be able to provide a certain life for my family and kids, etc. And I think setting boundaries is an important one. And once I did, I realized that people absolutely respect them. When I go home, there's going to be days here or there when you're jumping on a phone call here or there, but generally speaking, people respect the time I need away with my family, and they don't encroach on it. But it's up to us. Nobody else is going to set the boundaries for us. It's up to us to set those boundaries for ourselves.
That's great. What's one thing you do for your own mental health?
Hmm. For my own mental health, I got to get better at finding what I used to do a better job of working out. That's definitely something I'd like to get back into. Um, I love sports, right? I'd say for me, mental health wise, it's turning off my brain and stress and pressure. So sometimes it's even watching TV that nobody would think that I'd be watching, whatever shows it may be, is to disconnect from the high intensity environment and put my mind at a place where it can be whatever, silly, you know, in a way where people would just be surprised, right? I think for me, sometimes that's what's creates that balance in some ways.
Is there one thing that you do that helps you just wind down in the evening or to feel tired?
You're asking questions. I gotta get better at a lot of this. Wind down, generally, it's
Yeah, like sometimes I'm like, I know it's time to go to bed, and then I just like, I can't. Sometimes it's like I just don't feel tired, or I don't like to take melatonin or anything like that. But I do feel like high performers prioritize good sleep, or else they're sluggish. And I think different people do different things. Somebody told me recently that they go on a walk, which sounds counterintuitive to me, but I try everything from like blue light glasses to magnesium to reading as like natural melatonin to me. I got to do a
yeah,
better job of that.
yeah.
Yeah, just wondering. If not, it's okay. We can skip it.
Well, put it this way. No, one thing I used to sleep with the TV on. Okay, which I know sounds crazy, but it's how I always did, right? So number one was cutting that out from going to
Hmm.
bed and sleeping with it, and now I'll put on a podcast sometimes, and
Hopefully not
that'll
mine
help.
as what makes you
No,
fall
your
asleep.
yours is the great yours
Yeah,
is fantastic because usually within
thanks.
5 minutes I'm out. No, but I do, and I come back to them. But yeah, no, I'll put on a podcast or something. But honestly, for me, part of it is even emails literally leading up to bed. I try to disconnect for a few, and believe it or not, the simple act of even just hanging out with my wife and watching something on TV that's mindless for a couple hours before bed. Sometimes there's work involved while we're doing it, but I try to like disconnect, and having something break up the day, because we have kids, we're go go go, put them to sleep, and then you sit down eating dinner later than we should. um Having something break up the day so you're not working all the way through, going to sleep, waking up, and doing the same thing. I think that's what ultimately creates burnout. Your mind needs to separate from the day-to-day hustle and grind that we kind of go through. So I will admit it's an area of improvement for me. My wife even tells me better habits before bed. I don't have the best habits. They're a little bit better than they were before, but they're definitely not the best. And I feel it. And candidly, it's like an area I know how I feel when I go and get rest versus when I don't. It's without rest, everything in life feels a lot harder.
Yeah,
Right. And
100%.
so yeah, definitely an important thing to do.
Okay, got a few last final rapid fire questions for you. You don't have to be rapid fire though. If I talk to your team at work, what would you hope they say about you as a leader?
Um, what would I say? I hope.
What would you hope they say about you as
Yeah,
a
I want
leader?
them to say a lot of great things about me, but I'm trying to like narrow it down. Uh, that I care, right? Because that builds trust. They know they're doing it for a reason. But I would definitely want them to know that I care about the bigger picture, all of them. It's not about me. It's about the greater good. And I benefit from all of that as well.
Do you have any phrases or mantras that have helped you through tough times?
Um, yeah, I'm looking at a poster here that I have in my office, and my wife thinks I'm ridiculous. Um, it goes with the whole theme of no pain, no gain, right? It's Rocky quote that says, "It ain't about how hard you hit; it's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward." That's how winning is done. So I try to remind myself that because at the end of the day, I think about whether it's work, marriage, parenting, whatever it is, sports, success, without a level of pain, the things that matter the most in life are all hard. So it's going to hurt, but the reward is so great on the other side. So no pain, no gain. If it's easy and if it's not painful in any way, it probably doesn't matter much. So I always remind myself with all the different things. And that's when I realize, like, as difficult and as much responsibility I may have in my life and as much pressure I may have, it's all really good stuff, right? It's up to me to manage through that, but most people would kill to have all these pressures, right? That I get to sit here and kind of experience. And so yeah, long-winded way of saying is like I think no pain, no gain. If it
Yeah.
doesn't have if it doesn't hurt, it's probably not important.
I imagine some of that pain helps you develop more pain tolerance in
100%.
general. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
What's one thing you know now that you wish you knew at 40?
Hmm. Expect the unexpected. When I was 40, I thought it was it. I had figured it out. I knew where I was retiring and there was a clear path ahead. And then you get punched in the teeth and you realize, yep, you got to rebuild it and do it again, which is fine. I think it's ultimately what keeps us young.
Yeah.
When we lose that edge, that's when we start aging. And so, but yeah, definitely is expect the unexpected and it'll be okay.
What's one thing you've learned about managing grief?
Hmm. Don't do it alone. Talk about it. You realize that many others have either gone through or are currently going through the same thing, and when you go through it and you realize you're not alone, it makes it feel more manageable because you've watched people around you overcome it as well.
Fast forward 20 years from now, what do you hope Aiden says about you as a dad?
uh Man, now you're going straight to the core. It's um oh man. uh I'd want him to say that I always recognized that the most important job I ever had was being a dad and a husband, and not what I do at work, no matter how much success I have at work.
Love it. What is one book that's impacted you that you recommend other people read?
Impacted me or I enjoyed? Well, maybe it
It
did
could be
actually.
fiction or anything. Just
No,
yeah.
as crazy as this sounds, one of the books that stuck with me so much was Open by Andre Agassi. And I don't know if you've read that. Uh, I mean, I loved him growing up playing, watching tennis, but I never realized how much of a love-hate relationship he had with tennis. And so it actually gets me thinking. And when we go back to it, I think the important thing is it goes back to the message of what we want to do ourselves versus what we think people are expecting of us, right? You're good at this, so this is what you're supposed to do. But there's a fine line where you could be great at something, and if you don't enjoy it, life's too short. And I'm not saying his path was the right or wrong one, but I did apply it to my life. And, I look at it and go, I actually don't want to succumb to the pressure of what other people think. I'm always going to stay true to what it is that I want to do. And then I one clarification with the question with Aiden, it's not a job being a parent, but I think, I said I want him to look at me and say my main job was to be a dad. It's not, but my main priority in life was always being a dad and a husband and a family man ahead of work, but
Yeah.
also appreciating the success I had at work. That's at the end of the day, I always had perspective on what mattered most.
My kids ask me now, like, why don't you just take the day off? And it's like 7 in the morning. I'm heading out the door. And someone said this to me in a podcast, but like the kids need to understand that like dad, because dad works hard, like they don't get it, like the concept of having to go to work sometimes. And it's something that I try to remind them of, but I also try to do my best of like leaving the phone at the door right when I walk in, or sometimes I'll leave it in the car. Dana's like, "Where's your phone?" I'm like, "I just don't have
Yeah,
control. Just leave it in
yeah,
my
yeah. And
car."
I hear
You
you.
know?
I wish I actually probably need to have more discipline around that too. But it's a good point you make. Like hard work, and as much as we're gone, I even this weekend, funny enough, it came up about work and job. And I said, yes, I got to go to work. And then I said, one day you'll get a job and then you can make money and then you get to take care of yourself and buy the things you want. I was trying to teach them like the whole, like you work, so you get things. It's not handed to you without that level of work. So I definitely think it's good. But I also learned, like, there's a video I saw once where it was a dad leaving work and his son wanted to get an extra hug when he was saying bye, and he got in his car, and then his kid wanted a hug. And in most situations we're like, I'm late, I gotta go, and you want to rush to get to whatever meeting. Then he got out of the car and gave his kid a hug, right? And that shapes what the kid's day is going to be like. And it also shows, like, no matter what, you're my priority. That stuck with me. And there's days sometimes where I'm rushing, but I don't want him to feel rushed when he's expressing like love or anything like that. Um so yeah, for me it's and I lost my train of thought because you brought up Aiden, and this is my soft spot in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, right? But I as much as the values of going to work and stuff like that, I also think it's super important to slow down. And it's okay to be late a couple minutes to a meeting, even though everybody says I'm late to every meeting, and I need to improve on it. Fair enough, but it's never, you'd never be too late to stop for a few seconds and have those moments either.
Yeah. It's good to have our spouses remind us of those things. Last question. You're talking to somebody early on in their career, and maybe they're you know 27. They've had a few years of work experience under their belt. They want to make a big impact. What are just two or three general pieces of life/career advice you would impart on them?
If they want to make an impact, number one is why. Like what is it that you want to do, right? First you want to identify what it is, and then why do you want to do it? What is the impact you're going to make in general? And I say this, and I don't think there's a wrong answer. I mean, Samir and I used to talk about it, and he'd be like, I want to start a company and I want to go and impact thousands and thousands of people, maybe more, right? And I'd be like, yeah, but I get so much gratification at looking at our 30 people here, right? And seeing that I make an impact in their lives. So every person is driven by different things, right? And I think as a 27-year-old that's deciding what kind of impact they're going to make, the biggest impacts they'll end up making are when they're doing it for the right reason, right? And they have passion and conviction around it, and they because that's what's going to help them get up and grind and do it when it's really, really difficult. Again, going back to it, if you're just doing it to chase money, there's money to be made in so many areas. That's not going to be enough of a reason. At one point, you will have the money, and then what's going to get you out of bed, right? So you have to always remember, like, that other element of it is the most important. So for me, I would say is, if you want to make an impact, make sure it's driven by something that matters to you. If founder starts a company, you say, why did you start the company? What's the motivating force? It's when they start sharing their stories, if whether it's a company in life sciences, they're like, well, I had a family member that went through this and I didn't want to, so I created a problem to help solve for it. That's what gets people around you inspired, when people understand you're doing it for like a bigger reason. And you need to be able to articulate and explain that to people too.
Yeah, I love it. That's great advice. Do you feel like we missed anything? I appreciate you leaning into this.
No, I don't think so. I think we touched on a lot. It's
Awesome.
funny though, given how long we've known each other, and even talking about it, sometimes you learn something I know new about each other along the way as well too. So it's kind of cool.